This is Ford End Watermill in Ivinghoe in rural Buckinghamshire. It's a small farm mill that has produced flour and animal feed for centuries, and it has done this just using the power of water. In this film, we'll show you how a small stream like this can power machinery like this, and how wheels, gears and stones can turn a bin of grain into bags of flour. We'll also show how hard it was to produce flour before wind and water mills came into use, as well as giving you a glimpse of a modern flour mill in operation. But before we look at how the mill works, let's talk about bread. People around the world have eaten bread for thousands of years. It's rich in energy-producing carbohydrates, plant proteins and vitamins. It's made from water, yeast and flour, the flour being made by grinding grains of wheat. This bread is being made in a kitchen at home, the same way bread has been made for centuries. Dough made from mixing the ingredients is needed to make it very smooth. Then it is left to rise before being baked in the oven. Here we see wheat being harvested in Buckinghamshire. Today, this wheat is ground in modern mills using electrical power to grind grain on an industrial scale using steel rollers. A fully automated mill such as this can produce over 100,000 tonnes of flour a year. That's over 250 tonnes a day. Today, most bread is baked in commercial bakeries such as this. So that the first we see of the bread is when the loaves and the rolls are displayed on the shelf in the supermarket or at the local baker's. Electricity has transformed flour production. Before it was available, mills were either driven by wind or water power. And before these mechanised mills, grain had to be ground by hand, as demonstrated here by Michael. Here he is using a saddle quern from the Iron Age some 2,000 years ago, found not far from Ford End. He's pushing an upper stone, a muller, across the lower saddle-shaped quern stone. It's hard work breaking up the grains of wheat, as you can see. Something faster and easier was needed. This is better. This is a rotary quern, invented in the Mediterranean in early Roman times. It still relies on human power, but here we are rotating one stone on top of another, and it is much more efficient. See how the flour pours out from between the stones, much the same way as wheat is ground on a bigger scale in a windmill or a watermill. The rotary quern remains efficient enough for it still to be used in rural India. The power of water was one of the first means used to mechanise the grinding of wheat. In the 1st century BC, the famous Roman architect and civil engineer Vitruvius made an illustration of the main parts of a watermill, which we can still recognise at Ford End. Thus, from Roman times, mills were being driven by water power, and by the time of the Domesday Book in 1086, there were thousands of watermills in England. However, following the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century, the operation of watermills declined over the next 100 years. Our local history society rescued this building and its machinery in the early 1960s, after it had fallen into disrepair, and with the help of many volunteers, it was restored to its former glory. It was opened to the public in 1976, and it's been producing flour again since 1991. The mill is on a tiny stream, the Whistlebrook. So how do you get such a small stream to power the mill? The answer is a mill pond, where a head of water can be maintained from the damming of the stream so that when water is released, the mill's water wheel can be driven. Here's Chris, our mill manager. Before we start, he's going to turn the boards by the overflow to increase the head of water available by a few more inches. This further increases the power available for grinding the wheat. A cross-section of the mill from the front shows the 3 floors with the water wheel at the right-hand side. The bin floor is at the top, where the grain used to be stored in large bins. Then there is the stone floor, where the wheat is ground by the millstones. And finally, there is the meal floor, where the meal or flour is delivered for bagging. Whilst a small release of water from the mill pond isn't enough power to drive the mill stones, it can power a hoist to lift sacks of grain up to the bin floor. In days gone by, the miller would engage a pulley and the sacks would be raised through 2 sets of clapper doors and stored in large hoppers on the bin floor. Today, we feed the grain directly into the hopper above the millstone on the stone floor. As you see, there are 2 sets of millstones on this floor. One is for animal feed and is no longer in use. And one, still in use, is for the grinding of wheat to produce flour. This set uses hard French burr stones, which are encased to prevent grain and flour from escaping. The upper stone rotates over the stationary lower stone, sending the flour, or meal, to their edges. This flour is then fed down a wooden chute, called a meal chute, seen here on the meal floor, so the flour can be bagged prior to sale.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to Ford End Watermill. We're a fully working example of a 19th century watermill. We're all run by volunteers.
Today, we welcome visitors to the mill from Easter onwards through the summer, and our mill manager, Chris, describes the history of the mill and how it works before milling gets underway.
Now, we try and keep to a minimum. It's pretty much as you would see in the building if you'd walked in the mill 100, possibly even 200 years ago. The mill was actually
We begin with the water wheel being still, so that no machinery in the mill is moving. This is so that what is called the jack ring, a small metal ring below the millstone, can be lowered to engage with the stone nut, to set the millstone in motion when water from the mill pond is fed along the channel to drive the water wheel. This in turn drives the wheels or gears inside the mill building, delivering power upwards via the main shaft to rotate the upper millstone. The gears have interlocking cogs, and the speed depends on the number of cogs. They are progressively reduced, so that with the water wheel running at just 6 revolutions per minute, the runner stone runs at 90 revolutions per minute. An operation called tentering is used to increase or decrease the gap between the stones. This adjusts the fineness of the flour. So that the miller can monitor the rate at which the grain is fed into the stones, he listens for the so-called damsel chattering away. This is a vertical bar with 4 lobes or arms which strike the inclined shoe below the hopper, jogging grain into the eye of the runner stone. Can you hear it chattering? The miller also listens out for the bell attached to the horse, the wooden frame supporting the hopper. This bell is kept out of contact with the damsel by a strap held down by the weight of the grain in the hopper. So when the grain is low, the strap is released and the bell falls against the damsel, causing the bell to ring. Then the miller needs to dash upstairs to add grain to the hopper. With the mill in operation, the building comes alive as wheels rotate, the stones grind the grain, and flour is delivered down to the meal floor and into bags for sale. Here at Ford End, we recognise that this ancient mill is a valuable learning resource for today, whilst offering a glimpse of our heritage. It shows how science was applied by our forebears to produce sustainable energy, which we would describe today as carbon-free and environmentally friendly, to help produce food for the table. We hope that a visit to Ford End Watermill in school groups, with friends or with family, offers a fun way to experience a part of our heritage, as well as seeing practical ways of applying what can be learnt in the classroom. We're proud of our mill, and we hope you have enjoyed this introduction to this hidden gem in Ivinghoe.